This is really cool because when you start asking questions like this is where it becomes really intriguing for a Latter-day Saint to consider the origin of Freemasonry, where it came from and when it started, and then figure out how that or understand how that overlapped with our temple endowment, right? So, and I'll kind of explain what I'm talking about here. So, here are the earliest Masonic minutes that we have, which I'll show you here in a second where they were. But these are dated July 31st, 1599. And this must be in some sort of like Gaelic because they were found at the Lodge of Edinburgh. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but Mary's Chapel #1 in Scotland in the 1400s, or started in the 1400s. These notes are from 1599, obviously, but I think most scholars who look into this understand that this chapel or this lodge was started sometime in the 1400s, and it's personally my belief, and we can debate this, but that masonry as we know it, and the masonry, although it's probably evolved, but that Joseph knew and that we know today, it was probably started here, regardless of the lore and the stories that they tell about Solomon's temple and that they use in their rituals. And we can talk about that, but that's in a simple way to say that I personally believe that masonry started in the 1400s and probably in Scotland, which is actually really cool for Latter-day Saints because the origins of their ritual overlap with the origins of our ritual. Anyway, we can
Yeah,
talk
that's
about it.
yeah, no, that's really interesting. You mentioned kind of the lore surrounding the history of Masonry has a
Mhm.
lot to do with Solomon's Temple and all of that. Um, did did you encounter a lot of that kind of lore and stuff as you were getting into this yourself?
In the degrees, yes. The degrees, the first, second, and third degrees, are ultimately centered around a story about a man named Hiram Abiff, who was a mason who worked on Solomon's temple. And you kind of learn his story, and there's a story that goes behind it that they teach principles of morality and of divine living and things like that. So yeah, it's very. I didn't learn before I entered the first degree, but in the first degree, it's very. Yeah, and I can kind of show you here. Let me show you some pictures. Here is a, well, I can show you this lodge. Here is the Grand Lodge of Utah, which is on, I think it's South Temple and State Street in downtown Salt Lake. This is right where I serve my mission. Here is the inside of a lodge. This is not the inside of the Salt Lake City Lodge. I couldn't find a good picture of it, but this is essentially what a traditional Masonic lodge, at least in the United States, probably in Europe as well and around the world, but at least in the United States, what it would look like. And on the left side, you can kind of see the visual. And then on the right side, you can kind of see a blueprint version. And in the east is where the worshipful master sits. He's kind of like the president. And then across from him is what we call the senior warden. He's kind of like the first counselor in a way. And then to the south, we have the junior warden. And they are positioned in those directions, in those cardinal directions for a purpose that have to do with the rituals. And then every other person who's involved, who has a position, will sit in their designated spot. And then on the sides, you kind of have the pews where the extra members would sit. Um, and then here, let me go to this one. Here's a depiction of a degree. You can see the initiate on the left with his escort. He's blindfolded, his knee is exposed, and his garb is over the right shoulder. And again, you probably see, and we'll probably get into some Latter Day Saint, overlap there. But